Mil Malco the Carhirli, agus bhí Majira Conra, Benny Hugh Imasnaman, Acta, Deputy Colin and Johannish, so from a meeker, but Mr.
That was a bit of Irish for the speaker. It's not relevant to your
here, so there isn't. Right, Jan.
Absolutely. The way of the future. So, Mr. Long, thank you very much for coming, and I'm just going to ask a few questions. I'm going to try and make a few statements and ask questions because we really just want to elicit information, and I know you're going to be cooperative. And again, every single witness I've asked, did you read the Controller and Auditor's report?
Yes, indeed.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you read Chapter 4, Project Eagle Loan Sale Process?
Yes.
Okay. And would you agree with me, it's the longest chapter in the report? It is
if you say so, I'm sure
yes,
that's
it
right,
is. It's 25 or 26 pages,
okay.
and it's the longest chapter in the book, and it raises concerns in relation to the sale process. And those concerns are clearly outlined, and you've read them.
Sure.
Have you a difficulty with those concerns as outlined?
Well, not with the concerns in general. I think that's part of the Controller and Auditor General's remit to review the report. In his report to review the sale process. Is there anything specific you'd like to point to?
Well, you see, it would help me I'll have very few questions if you accept it. If you're accepting his concerns as outlined,
well,
that's the end of my questioning process.
Fair enough. I mean, what I would say is that the Controller and Auditor General is entitled to be concerned, if it's his prerogative, I guess, to assess the sale process to the best of his ability. I don't mean to catch you, sure.
but it's outlined, and it's just to save time.
Sure.
And he has. That's the longest chapter. You've read the report.
Yes, indeed.
He has set out concerns in relation to that process.
Yeah.
He's identified them. In my 20 minutes, I can't go through 25 pages. You've gone through it.
Yes, indeed.
You were the expert advice.
Right.
And so, when he raises these concerns, do you accept them?
Well, I mean, would you like me, Deputy, just to give you my take on the sale process? Would that be helpful?
I'm asking you, do you accept his concerns in relation to the concerns he has raised in relation to the number of bidders, the restrictions given, the qualified nature of your opinion given?
Yeah. Well,
he's raised all of these, so
sure.
it would simplify. If you accept them, that's okay. If you don't, tell me which ones you don't accept.
Yeah. What I would say is that, from my perspective, we ran a highly competitive sale process that was designed to meet NAMA's objectives,
okay.
and which did in fact meet NAMA's objectives, and which resulted in a sale of the portfolio, codenamed Project Eagle, to Cerberus at a price in excess of NAMA's reserve price. So as such, I would say that the transaction was successful. And furthermore, I would say that, in my view, the sale price achieved was the highest price available in the market at the time. So if the Controller and Auditor General believes that a different sale process would have resulted in a higher price, then he's obviously entitled to that opinion. Yeah. But what I would say is that I believe that the sale process was appropriate in the circumstances.
You see, I've asked each witness, and it would really simplify matters if when witnesses read the report, they either accept it or don't, or tell me which ones they don't accept. And so he has raised concerns in relation to I'm going to go through some of them now because you're not identifying them for me, which is a pity in a sense, because we're not here to accuse you of anything. Sure. It's just you were brought in to do a job, and you're saying you did that job to the best of your ability. I'm not questioning that, so you can relax. Yeah. I'm asking you of the concerns raised. Yeah. Do you agree with those concerns?
Well, let's take each of them in turn. Okay. I think the Controller and Auditor General seems to be concerned that the process was not as competitive as it might have been. That's one of his concerns. Mm-hmm. My response is to make, is to point out that competition is not simply a function of the number of parties involved in a process. Uh-huh. It's to do with the motivation of those parties. And even though there were fewer participants in the Project Eagle sale process than in some other NAMA sale processes, there was real competitive tension throughout. And it was that competitive tension, in my view, that motivated the bidders and which resulted in Cerberus being willing to pay a price for the portfolio in excess of NAMA's reserve price.
Okay, so you're telling this committee that you're standing over that there was competitive tension
Yes.
at all stages?
Yes.
Okay, I'll come back on that. And you're telling us that today. So you don't accept the Controllers and Auditor General's concerns that there wasn't, or that there was questions about the competitive...
Yeah.
You're after making a statement now. You can withdraw it if you want, but you're saying there was competitive tension.
I'm saying there was competitive tension,
All
yeah.
right. Have you worked for NAMA? Had you worked for NAMA prior to this?
I hadn't.
You hadn't. Have you worked for NAMA since this?
No.
Okay. Had you been part of a process of a sale of loans similar to this?
Yes.
Okay. Where was that?
In 2011, we advised Royal Bank of Scotland on a transaction codenamed Project Eagle, which...
Project Eagle as well?
I beg your pardon, excuse me.
Yeah.
It was called Project Isabel, and it was the sale of a loan portfolio of around £1.4 billion.
So a loan portfolio similar to Project Eagle?
Well, let me come back to
Okay.
that point if I may, because I think Project Eagle was quite unique. I think the circumstances which led to the Project Eagle sale process were unique, and Project Eagle as a portfolio had some quite unique characteristics. But we advised RBS on a transaction codenamed Project Isabel that was acquired by Blackstone. I was a core...
Just 1 second now. Was it similar to Project Eagle? What role did you have in that?
Well, we were the loan sale advisor to Royal Bank of Scotland.
Did you advise on strategy? Did you evaluate the loans? Had you a different role than you had in Project Eagle?
I'd say in Project Isabel we had a role that was broader in its scope.
Okay, so it's not... Okay, it was broader in its scope than this, so it's not comparable with this?
Well, at the heart of our role on Project Eagle was the sale, the conduct of a sale process. And on all of the loan portfolio sales that Lazard has worked on and that I personally have been involved in, that is really the core function that our client has invited us to undertake. So on Project Isabel, there was more preparatory work than there was with Project Eagle. We also advised Commerzbank on the sale of a portfolio in Spain. That was codenamed Project.
Both of them were prior to Project Eagle?
No, Project Octopus was round about the same time.
Okay, and have you worked for NAMA since or done work for NAMA since?
Not since Project Eagle.
So Project Eagle was the sole work
Indeed.
that you've done for NAMA?
Indeed.
Okay. Have you, in the other two for, sales that you mentioned, did you advise on alternative strategies? Did you analyse market conditions?
Well, we
you say yes or no? Did you?
On Project Octopus, we didn't advise on alternative strategies. The Commerzbank had made up its mind to sell the portfolio. Where we did advise them was on whether the portfolio should be sold as a whole or should be sold.
So you did give an opinion on that?
Yes, we did.
That didn't happen with Project Eagle?
No.
No. Okay. Now, in relation to the competitive tension, I think 3 firms were invited in, isn't that right?
Well, ultimately, we engaged
No,
with...
listen to my question, sorry, now, and I want to be specific, because this chairperson is hard on time.
Fair enough.
3 firms were invited first, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were satisfied that that was good competitive tension, those 3 firms?
Well, had all 3 firms been seriously interested in bidding for the portfolio, then that may have been sufficient competitive tension, but they weren't.
My question is, when you invited 3 in, you were happy with that first, depending on whether they were going to stay in the process or not, but you were happy with the 3.
Yes.
And so when the Controller and Auditor General points out in his report on the chapter that you've read in detail, the first 3, he sets out that the first 3 that were invited, if we first look at page 77 of his report, and he sets out the companies there, and he sets out the ones in UK and Ireland sales, and you'll see the percentage.
Yeah.
And you add up those percentages, 88 or something percentage of those companies, Cerberus, Lone Star, Gold Sachs and Apollo Deutsche, they make up for the biggest sales in Ireland and the UK, isn't that right?
Yes,
Okay.
Europe and UK, Ireland. I think
Lovely.
that's a very relevant.
Okay, just let me stay with my question for a moment, and then we go back to page 73, and we'll go back to page 71, and we'll work 71 and 77 together.
Sure.
And then the first three that came in, that you invited in, for the first three was Blackstone, Starwood and Oaktree.
Yeah.
None of those appear on page 77 as the big companies that do the loan sales. Isn't that right?
Well, I mean, Blackstone appears.
No,
but-
listen to my question, sorry now.
Sure.
The first four that account for the biggest majority of the sales on page 77, and I've listed them out.
Sure.
The three that you invited in, none of those three come in that list.
That's correct.
Okay. And of that list, in your second round of bidding, only one comes in, isn't that right? Lone Star. And Cerberus, two actually come in on the second round.
And Apollo. So that's three.
Three come in on the second round.
Yeah.
Okay. And on the first round, none of them come in. None of those in the high group come in.
There are four names in the high group, and it's
And on
true
the
that
just a minute, on the first round, when you invited in three companies, none of those top four companies are brought in.
that's correct.
Okay. Subsequently, when there's a leak in the paper, more people come forward.
Sure.
Is that correct? Is
Yes.
that how the next stage happens?
Well, we received a number of approaches following the leak.
My question was very simple. Is that how the next stage happened after the leak? Is that how the third round happened?
Yes.
Okay.
That is how it
That's
happened,
lovely. And you approached, I think, did you approach, your company approach Fortress at that stage?
No, Fortress approached us.
Fortress approached you.
Yeah.
Who did you approach? Anybody? No. Everybody
No.
came from the leak?
Yeah.
All of them came from the leak
Yes.
in the paper? Okay. At that point, did you go back and say to NAMA, look, there's been a leak, more people are coming out of the woodwork, interested people,
Yes.
big firms?
Yes.
You did? Okay,
Yes.
tell us what happened.
Well, NAMA allowed us to assess each of those approaches on their merits, and NAMA agreed that we should allow two of those parties, namely Goldman Sachs and Fortress, to join the process.
Okay. How many did you refuse?
I believe that there were 9 such inquiries, and we admitted 2 parties to the process and not the other 7.
There were 10.
I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
Sure.
But I mean, you know exactly, because you're the expert. So there were 10 firms came forward. You allowed 2 in.
Yeah.
Why did you reject the other 8?
Because they didn't meet NAMA's criteria for inclusion in the process, and also because we felt that, very simply put, we felt that they would not be additive to the sale process. We felt they didn't have the capacity to pay more for the loans than the parties that we already had in the process.
And that was the reason you refused the 8 of them?
Yes.
Are you saying that?
Yes.
That was the reason you refused the other 8 firms?
Very, very simply put, we didn't feel like the other 8 would be additive to the sale process, and by that I mean that we didn't believe in our professional advisory judgment that they had the capacity to pay more for these loans than the parties who were already in the process.
All right. Well, let's look at page 72, 439. Following the media coverage, NAMA and our Lazard received inquiries from a further 10 firms. 2 of these, Goldman Sachs and Fortress, were allowed to enter the process. Lazard informed NAMA that it had excluded the other 8 firms, 7 of whom it said were well known to Lazard and had excellent reputations. Excellent reputations. At other stages, and we look at page 75, the reasons given for refusal. On the very next page, reasons for given. We just jump down to request to enter process refused. 1, to ensure confidentiality of the process. Need to adhere to timetable. Sorry, you don't have the report?
I do.
Oh, yeah, page 73. Page
73, I thought you said 75. Forgive me.
No, 73. Okay. Clash of accents. Okay. Request to enter process refused. 8 refused. Confidentiality. Need to adhere to timetable. Maintain the motivation of bidders already in the process. Listen to that one now.
Yeah.
You maintain the motivation of bidders already in the process who were told that only a limited number of parties would be included. Some firms appeared only to be interested in parts of the portfolio. There's no mention of not meeting NAMA criteria here.
Well, Deputy, if we had thought that any of these other parties, apart from Goldman Sachs and Fortress, had the capacity to pay more for the loans than the parties who were already in the process, of course we would have admitted them.
Not admitted, not set out here. These are the reasons given by ye.
Well, I would say that all of these are specific factors, and that the commercial principle which I've just outlined is, if you like, the overarching factor. It's the thread that ties all of these factors together. I mean, if for example, if a firm were only interested in part of the portfolio, then it's clear that such a firm would not have the capacity to buy the entire portfolio, let alone to pay a price in excess of the price that was eventually achieved.
Okay, let's look at page 76. And it elaborates on the reasons. Page 76, firms refused entry. You see that?
Yep.
And we won't read it all. And on the 26th of February, NAMA emailed Lazard to inform them that they had received 2 further inquiries. Lazard, yourselves, responded to NAMA the same day. We know both of these firms well and hold them in high regard. However, our advice would not be to include them in the process on the grounds that we already have sufficient competition. Nothing to do with criteria now. Nothing to do with money or ability to buy. And including them would undermine the assertion to the existing participants that the process is restricted to a handful of parties. No mention of criteria now.
Well, competition kind of speaks to the ability to pay a high price, the ability to meet NAMA's reserve price.
It doesn't seem like that, Mr. Long. In fairness to you, I'm just reading what's here. And I did preface all my remarks to say, did you read it?
Yes, indeed.
And you could have come back and said it doesn't capture. And there's no mention of criteria or ability to buy. You have given an assurance that it's going to be limited. In fact, at some other stage, I think priority, I've it underlined, if we look at firm F on the same page, Lazard separately emailed setting out its conversation with another firm that was refused entry. I told them it was closed to new entrants on the 27th of February. Frustration is expressed by the potential bidder, given their track record and their relationship with NAMA. I didn't say this to him, but I recall discussing firm F with you at the outset. This is your firm.
Sure.
But concluding that there were other firms who deserved priority. He said he would call his contacts at NAMA to express his unhappiness. So limited time has been set by NAMA, and you're following that. Limited restrictions and limited bidders. And you've set it out clearly.
Could I elaborate?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Like I said earlier, I mean, competition isn't about the number of participants. It's about having the right participants in the process and ensuring that they're highly motivated. Ultimately, you only sell the portfolio once, and you sell it to the highest bidder. I really don't think it would have helped NAMA if we'd received a lot of other bids, well below the reserve price. That would have added nothing to the process. I mean, as you pointed out, Deputy, on the table in section 4.4.2, it highlights very clearly that the parties that were included in the process, that were invited to participate in the process, accounted for the vast majority, almost the totality of loan portfolio sales.
No, Mr. Long, I don't accept that. You invited in 3 bidders to start with that didn't feature at all in the major companies that were in this business.
But then we invited more in subsequently.
You certainly did on an ad hoc basis when things happened and things emerged. I'm blame no blame. I'm asking you just to help me.
Sure.
In relation to PIMCO, when they withdrew, what questions did you ask or what information were you given in relation to PIMCO?
When PIMCO withdrew, I mean, we were obviously disappointed because it seemed as if they were a highly motivated bidder. So we were, as with any bidder who withdrew, to the extent that we thought that they were going to, or seemed to be willing to pay a high price, then we were sorry to lose them. But we understood that PIMCO withdrew for commercial reasons.
Do you hear my question? What question did you ask in relation to their withdrawal, circumstances, and what information was given to you?
We asked PIMCO why they withdrew, and they told us, and I think I quote, this transaction wasn't for them. Okay. And we understood at the time that it was for commercial reasons, that they decided that they didn't want to buy the portfolio after
Nothing was mentioned to you about success fees? No?
No, not at the time,
And nothing occurred to you that there might be something amiss with this company? Allegedly?
No, because several other parties had also withdrawn along the way. Like Lone Star, for example, did quite a lot of work and then withdrew.
Just, Mr. Long, wait a second. Yeah. Are you aware of how long PIMCO was in this process prior to your arrival?
I mean, I am now.
You could?
Yeah.
Were you aware then?
I was aware that they had made an inquiry and approach to NAMA in the autumn. I wasn't aware of precisely how much time they had spent on this transaction.
Okay, I'll finish up with PIMCO. Sure. You're aware now, what are you aware of now as to when they came into the process, prior to you? When did PIMCO come on the scene, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge now, I think it's set out in the report.
Just answer me.
Yeah, I think in June 2013.
Yeah. Well, if you watch the evidence, it seems they came on the scene much earlier than that. When did they have access to the data room?
Was it in October?
I don't know.
Okay, I think that's where it says.
But weren't these questions for Lazard to see if one company was getting or had an unfair advantage? Was that not a relevant part?
There was a concern when we approached bidders, and you know that we approached bidders sequentially, and
yes.
And it may be that the first three that we approached. Decided, two of the three, I think you said,
withdrew.
Were not in the kind of short list of if you like, major players set out.
Just Mr. Long, I need an answer to my question about PIMCO.
Yeah.
Do you think that you needed to know that information? Because if PIMCO were involved as far back as April that year, if they had access to the data room before the other bidders, would it confer an unfair advantage on them, give them leverage?
Well, our objective was to run a fair and transparent process.
Did you hear my question? Sorry, no.
Yeah.
Would it give them an unfair advantage? Would it give them an extra advantage? Would it give them plus in the process? Would it?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. It depends on, I think, time spent is one thing, but the really important factor is access to information.
They had access to information. We know that now because it's been said here repeatedly, and we've had a letter. So they had access for all of 13, and then they had specific access to a data room.
Yeah.
And then bidders are brought in. I'm finishing up, the chair's looking at me. And in fact, there is a reference here that the limited open nature was as much to give protection to PIMCO and to, as if that's my interpretation, to give integrity to the process. So it seemed PIMCO was the only game in town. You were brought in with a design around that, and other bidders were brought in on a very limited basis to give the illusion that there was competition. Yes or no?
And yet Cerberus bought the portfolio, not PIMCO.
Mr. Long, why was that? What? I leave it to my colleagues.
Okay,
thank you very much,
Deputy
Mr.
Captain Murphy.
Murphy.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. And the sequence of people have indicated so.